What's going on, everybody? Welcome into episode 137 of the MudWatch Sports Podcast on this Friday, January 23rd, 2026. I'm your host, Zach Malum. But before we get started, please subscribe below. Follow all of my social accounts. Let's start things off by recapping a wild week in New York baseball. And we start things out in Queens, where on the same day, the Mets introduced Bo Bichette to Citi Field. They acquire all-star pitcher FREDDY PERALTA from the Milwaukee Brewers, along with fellow right-hander Tobias Myers. In return, they trade Brandon Sproat and one of their top prospects in Jet Williams. A big-time trade by the New York Mets. They end up getting a guy at the top end of their rotation, a huge need for the Mets all offseason long, and they finally land FREDDY PERALTA, a guy who came up in the Milwaukee Brewers system back in 2015 when, of course, David Stearns, the Mets president of baseball operations, was the general manager of the Milwaukee Brewers, so he knows Peralta very well, and Peralta became an ace in the last couple of years up in Milwaukee, not getting paid a lot right now by the Milwaukee Brewers, and he gets that $8 million salary that he brings now to New York with the New York Mets. So the Mets get a bargain in FREDDY PERALTA. They also add Tobias Myers to the deal, who was really solid a couple of years ago, has really gone back and forth between starting and relieving, and he's really done a good job up in Milwaukee of settling things down as a reliever. An ERA just over 1 in his couple of appearances as a reliever the last couple of years. So that's something that the Mets are looking for. They end up giving up Brandon Sproat as well as Jet Williams in the deal, and that's something that David Stearns was talking about, that it was not easy to give up Sproat, who came up in the Mets system and was a really solid prospect just at the beginning of last year. A mediocre year at best by Brandon Sproat through the minors as well as in the majors. And Jet Williams, a guy who was in the system for this Mets team, a small, speedy middle infielder as well as an outfielder. He only stands at 5'7", but he reminds me so much of so many young Milwaukee Brewers in their system, including Sal Frelick. They got Caleb Durbin as well, who they acquired from the New York Yankees. Small, speedy players that really do a good job on defense and steal a lot of bases. So he's going to be a perfect fit up in Milwaukee, and I think he could slot in really on opening day if they wanted him to. Jet Williams, a very young prospect and a very high promising prospect up in Milwaukee now. So the Mets end up getting, like I said, the guy at the top end of their rotation, and there's still a lot of question marks of whether some guys will bounce back after a rough year a season ago, including Sean Manaea as well as Kodai Senga, who dealt with injuries last year. David Peterson really fell off in a career high in innings pitched. So really, you're looking at the top end of that rotation with FREDDY PERALTA leading the way as the Mets ace. You got a young stud in Nolan McLean right behind him. The question is the guys behind McLean and Peralta really stepping up and getting healthy once again. If they are healthy, I'm in this Mets rotation, probably a 6-man rotation that they're looking at. They will be very, very worrying for opponents, and I think that's something that they went into this year hoping for. After last year, they started off red hot, one of the best teams, the best team in baseball for the first couple of months of the season. But, of course, the fall off after the really bad date of June 13th that Met fans are going to have a hard time forgetting heading into this year. They end up having a very solid rotation once again. They also have a really solid bullpen. A lot of the guys that they had last year, going into last year, got injured, including a big one in AJ Minter, a lefty arm out of the bullpen that they were really relying on to be a stud out of the bullpen in those middle innings, and he was just not able to do that. Of course, they lost their back end closer in Edwin Diaz, and he was rock solid every single time he went out on the mound. But they add Luke Weaver, they add Devin Williams, they have Tobias Myers as well in that bullpen to probably give them a little more length. Brooks Raley's still there, and I think that's really what the Mets are looking at right now, in a very solid group out in the bullpen as well well as in the starting rotation. They also have Jonah Tong in that starting rotation as well, a young player that they really were not willing to give up in a big deal like that for Freddie Peralta. They really believe in Tong more than they believed in Sproat, and I don't blame them. Tong is younger. He's also been really, really solid. Came all the way up through the Mets system just last year and was electric down in Double-A. Really only a couple of starts in Triple-A before the Mets desperately needed him in the majors. So he comes in once again for his rookie year. So the Mets rotation is set. It really all comes down to health for the Mets rotation. But I really want to focus on this lineup, which I also believe is set right now. Mets don't need to make any more moves, but that's not to say that there aren't questions heading into this upcoming season about the Mets lineup. And I think the first and main question is it too top heavy? You look at the top of the lineup, Francisco Lindor, you have Juan Soto, as well as Bo Bichette. And really after that, you get a bit of a drop-off with Marcus Semien. You got Jorge Polanco. You also have Luis Robert Jr. in there as well. But really, those top three guys are taking the load in terms of power in this lineup, getting on base consistently, and coming up clutch in the big moments for this Mets team. Runners in scoring position. Those three guys have to step up and really take the lead in terms of this Mets lineup. And I think when you look at 4 through 9 in this Mets lineup, it's a huge drop-off after 1 to 3. We still don't know what order exactly the Mets will be in from 1 to 3 in this lineup, whether it'll be Bichette leading off, Lindor leading off. It's all about, really, in this lineup, protecting the main man in Juan Soto. You don't want him to really be walking every single at bat, especially if he has a guy behind him that's not going to be able to drive him in terms of power, in terms of just getting on base as well. Juan Soto needs to really be in the spotlight and have the bat in his hands with a chance to win the game. That's really what it comes down to for this Mets team. And I think they have to really slot him in at the number 2 spot, whether it's right in front of Bo Bichette or right in front of Francisco Lindor. Can that get the Mets over the top? We will see, but I think it's very important to really look at the rest of this lineup and say, yeah, where's the other production coming from? There's really not much power in the bottom of this lineup. There can be in terms of Luis Robert Jr., who came into 2023 and had a monster year, 38 home runs, an electric performance by Luis Robert in 2023. But the last 2 seasons have been miserable out in Chicago for him. He had 14 home runs a season ago, just not good enough. 14 home runs, 53 RBIs, a 223 average. That's just not going to cut it, especially in this Mets lineup that needs guys to consistently get on base. The other guy I'm focusing on is Francisco Alvarez. 11 home runs after 25 of them in 2023. A couple of down years as well due to injury for Francisco Alvarez, and he needs to pick it up once again. Can he get back to that 23 form? We will see what happens, but they need the power badly. They lost the production from Pete Alonso last season. They lost the production from Brandon Nimmo as well, who was really not a flashy type of player, really wasn't going to get on base too often. He did give you some power and had 25 home runs, a career high, a season ago for the New York Mets. So can they get that production from Robert? Can they get that production from Francisco Alvarez? They also have Jorge Polanco, who had 20-plus home runs last season. But I think the drop-off clearly in terms of Marcus Semien and how his at-bats have been going as his career has gone on. He's on the other side of 30, and I think he's going to have a real drop-off once again this year in terms of his hitting. Can he bounce back after a rough year? Sure, but the age is really not on his side in this one. I think the biggest question in this Mets lineup is what is the deal with Mark Vientos, who had a very down year compared to 2024. Last year, he really was slowing down as the season went on. You saw some flashes in the middle of July, in the middle of August, I think back to the Little League World Series game that they played against the Seattle Mariners where he hit a walk-off home run. That's the Mark Vientos that we're used to after a couple of years ago. He really took off in the postseason in 2024. But Mark Vientos, I don't think has a place on this team right now. I think when you look at the DH spot, it's probably going to Jorge Polanco some days. You got some other guys that can really slot in there as well. Brett Beatty is more of a utility guy who you can't trust in so many positions. So maybe you give him the DH spot. Also, he's a lefty. But when you look at Mark Vientos, the right-handed bat in this lineup, I don't know where he fits right now. And I think he could play a little bit of first base, try and help out Jorge Polanco with that spot. But I trust Jorge Polanco, who has not played a single game at first base in his major league career, over Mark Vientos in that spot. Vientos, of course, at third base last year was really struggling in terms of his defense. He does not give you really anything on the defensive side. A bunch of errors in the big moments when the Mets needed it most, And I think Mark Vientos has probably played some of his last days in Queens. That's what it looks like right now. I think David Stearns could keep him and try and fit him into this lineup, see if he could break through in terms of his power, because that's the big thing with Mark Vientos. He can hit the long ball. He can hit the ball out of the ballpark, and that's something that the Mets need after, like I said before, they lost the power in Nimmo and Alonso. So what's going to happen with Mark Vientos? I think that's the very big question after the Mets made a ton of moves in the last week or so. Bo Bichette comes in the door. You also add Freddie Peralta. You also add Luis Robert Jr., and I think the Mets are ready to roll. No more moves to be done. What will happen with Mark Vientos, we will see in the next couple of weeks or so as the Mets get ready to go down to Port St. Lucie for spring training, as in just less than a month, they have pitchers and catchers arriving as well as a full team workout. We'll see what happens. But on the other side of New York, in the Bronx, the New York Yankees had also made some news this week. Not as much news as the New York Mets, but they end up getting their important piece that they lost after last year to free agency. Cody Bellinger is back in the Bronx on a 5-year, $162.5 million deal, according to sources including ESPN's Jeff Passan. They also included in the deal a couple of opt-outs after the second and third seasons, a $20 million signing bonus, as well as a full no-trade clause for Cody Bellinger, who's back in the Bronx. He was really primarily playing left field for the Yankees last year, played 59 games there for New York, but this is a guy who can play anywhere you want him to in terms of any position in the outfield, left, center, or right. He could also take some reps at first base if the Yankees need it, and it's a huge move for Cody Bellinger to be back in a Yankee uniform, especially with the career year he had a season ago. 29 home runs, 98 RBIs. Those are second in terms of career highs for Cody Bellinger. And really, you go back to that 2019 season where he was red hot, an MVP in the end, and a guy who really stepped up on the defensive side. He did exactly that and more for the Yankees last season, and I think he was a huge player for the Yankees to get back onto their roster heading into this upcoming season. Of course, they brought back Trent Grisham earlier on in a qualifying offer, so now the outfield is really set for this Yankees team. Cody Bellinger in left, you would think. You got Trent Grisham in center, and of course, Aaron Judge in right field. You also have some guys on the bench that you could really rely on. One of them is Jason Dominguez, who's just looking right now for an everyday role for this Yankees team. And yes, he has not really sparked something just yet in terms of his production up in the Bronx. And yes, he did so all those years down in the minors. You're waiting for the Martian to really get going in a Yankee uniform. And that's something that I think is just going to take a little bit of time. The guy has really struggled in terms of his switch hitting. He's really primarily a lefty batter, whereas right-handed, when he was batting right-handed, he was absolutely dreadful a season ago. And that's something that really brought his stock down in terms of this Yankees lineup. You only could rely on him as a lefty, and the Yankees had plenty of lefties in the lineup in Grisham as well as Bellinger, who were just doing a lot more than Dominguez was last year. They also have a young stud in the minors in Spencer Jones that I don't feel they're ready to bring up to the majors just yet. And I think it's going to take a little bit of time for Spencer Jones to really lock in AAA in order to come up to the majors and be part of this Yankees team. But right now they have Jason Dominguez, and I think he's going to end up being the backup right now, and a guy who can come in every other day or so and really fit into this lineup. He has to work on that righty swing. He also has to work on his defense, because you can really see the drop off in defense in terms of Cody Bellinger, Trent Grisham, Aaron Judge, and then Jason Dominguez, who really struggled when he went into left field last year and had a couple of misplayed balls. Just not what you want to see from Dominguez in the field, and that's something that he's going to have to work on this offseason. So it's the right move by the Yankees to bring back Bellinger. They still have a little bit of question marks right now, and I think the biggest question mark for the Yankees is their bullpen, because I feel like their lineup is set. I feel like their starting rotation is set as well. When you look at the guys coming back from injury, Gerrit Cole probably coming back in early June, Carlos Rodon anywhere from April to June, he will be back as well. But right now they have Luis Gil in the starting rotation. Cam Schlittler was an absolute stud in the playoffs last year for the Yankees. He's going to be back as well. And of course, the ace at the top right now in Max Fried will lead the way, the lefty arm, for the Yankees. As long as Gerrit Cole comes back in probably the month of June, I think this Yankees rotation is set. They also added another guy in Ryan Weathers to really weather the storm in terms of the injuries, no pun intended there. But I think when you look at Weathers as well as Ryan Yarbrough, who's really sitting in the bullpen right now, those are guys at the back end of the starting rotation that will give you length. I think in terms of their innings, you're probably not going to go too far with those two guys, but those are guys who are going to be able to eat some innings at the start of games and really make it a bullpen game in the end and allow this bullpen to really get to work. But that's where the Yankees need a little bit more. And I think Brian Cashman is on the phones right now trying to get another bullpen arm in there. They still have some guys from last year, and that's something that you really are liking for this Yankees team. Tim Hill, they brought back this offseason, but the three main guys that they kept from a season ago, Fernando Cruz, Camilo Doval, as well as their closer in David Bednar. Those three guys are really the back end of the Yankee bullpen. They got to lock things down and set things up for Bednar, who will really slam the door shut every single time. He was really a strong closer for the Yankees after they acquired him at the trade deadline from Pittsburgh. And really, they have to get some more guys around them to really set things up in terms of this bullpen. A couple of middle relievers. They lost Luke Weaver, of course, from last year. They also lost their setup man from last year in Devin Williams, who at the end of the year was the setup man after he struggled as a closer. They need to pick up the pieces just a little bit and add some more arms to this bullpen. But in terms of this lineup, I really think the Yankees are set right now. I don't think there's really a weakness in terms of this lineup. You could say that there's maybe a weakness in the infield. Of course, Jazz Chisholm will be playing second base. You would think Ben Rice is also playing first base. Right now, though, Ryan McMahon probably going to take the lead at third base. You have plenty of depth around him as well. Anthony Volpe starting off the season on the injured list, it looks like. So you're going to have some more guys to take the reins at shortstop as well. But the three guys that really nobody's talking about right now, Oswaldo Cabrera, Ahmed Rosario, as well as Jose Caballero, who can all chip in at both third base as well as shortstop. And even Ahmed Rosario can take some reps at second if Jazz Chisholm needs it. Oswaldo Cabrera can also play first if Ben Rice needs a day off. So they have three guys, three utility players in that infield that can really take on the load. You're looking at their offense and saying, yeah, it could be a little bit better. I think McMahon is trying to get his swing going for Yankee Stadium, that lefty swing, trying to make it similar to a guy like Cody Bellinger, where he hit 29 home runs last year, and a lot of them came in the short porch in right field at Yankee Stadium. So Ryan McMahon looking to improve this offseason, but you also have Jose Caballero, who once he gets onto the bases, He is causing havoc everywhere, and he is a disaster to deal with for opponent pitchers. So when you look at it, I think the Yankees are set in this lineup. It all comes down to their bullpen. But the main story, they bring back Cody Bellinger, and I think the Yankees are in a good spot right now after they give Cody Bellinger a 5-year, $162.5 million deal to come back to the Bronx. Shifting things to basketball, as the New York Knicks were in action on Wednesday night. They hosted the Brooklyn Nets at Madison Square Garden. And this game, frankly, was not even close. 120-66, the final. The Knicks absolutely trucked through the Brooklyn Nets to end their 4-game losing streak right where it is in the most lopsided win in franchise history. The Knicks win this one by 54. And like I said, it wasn't even close. And Jalen Brunson only had 20 points in this one. You're expecting a blowout like that for everybody to really go off in this game. They had a lot of contributions from everywhere, this Knicks lineup. And I think when you look at Jalen Brunson, 20 points along with 5 assists, 8 of 17 shooting, not his best night, but still put up 20 points in 31 minutes. The big contribution off the bench, Landry Shamet, who only played 15 minutes in the game, but 18 points, 6 3-pointers. He was 6 of 6 from beyond the arc, 6 of 7 from the field, and 18 points for Landry Shamet really will tell you the story in that one. The Knicks bench was rolling. They also got a good game from Deuce McBride, 14 points off the bench, 5 of 10 shooting, 3 3-pointers as well, with 6 rebounds and 4 assists to add to his tally. The real spotlight has been on Karl-Anthony Towns and whether the Knicks should trade him in the end. Had a solid game in this one. 14 points, 5 of 8 shooting, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, as well as a steal. I don't think the Knicks should trade Karl-Anthony Towns unless they get Giannis Antetokounmpo and a deal gets through with the Milwaukee Bucks. That's the only way I'm trading Cat right now. I think Cat is a very solid big man that will get the Knicks where they need to be. I don't know if he'll get them over the top in terms of a championship, but I think in the playoffs, he can step up in a big moment and get them over the line while he's next to the guys in Jalen Brunson, OG Anunoby, as well as Mikal Bridges. That's what you're looking for in terms of Cat. Get rebounds, put up some points, and I think Jalen Brunson will take the lead. But as long as Karl-Anthony Towns is along for the ride and getting the work done down low, I think the Knicks are in a good spot. Unless they get Giannis Antetokounmpo, I don't think Cat's going anywhere. There hasn't even really been reports around the Knicks in terms of that. I think the Knicks are very content right now with Karl-Anthony Towns, and I think they are going to continue to roll with him, even though it's been a rough stretch for the Knicks. It's a rough stretch, and they're still 26-18 after a very horrid stretch like they had, 9 losses in 11 games, and they end up beating Brooklyn now to really snap all of that. And still, they are 26-18, sitting near the top of the Eastern Conference. And it does not get any easier, as after the Knicks really run through the Brooklyn Nets, they get one of their toughest tests of the season, and it all takes place tomorrow afternoon, They go down to Philadelphia, and the 26-18 Knicks take on the 24-19 Philadelphia 76ers, who are red hot right now, and the Sixers really rolling in the Eastern Conference. They've won 2 of their last 3 after a couple losses to Cleveland just before that. But Philly at 24-19, they're 12-12 at home this year, which is not a great sign for the Sixers. But they've been a very solid team, and they've had the Knicks number multiple times this season. The Knicks 0-2 against the Sixers this year. Both of those games took place at Madison Square Garden, and Tyrese Maxey steps up when the moment is big, especially in the spotlight that he was in at MSG. He stepped up in both of those games. And the rest of the Sixers core, Joel Embiid had a great game yesterday against the Houston Rockets, a triple-double for him. You also have Paul George stepping up right now for the Sixers. And I think if the Sixers get their game going and get their game right, they can really take it to this Knicks team. They've proven that multiple times so far this season. So we'll see what happens. Make sure you tune in. It's going to be a great game tomorrow afternoon, a 3 o'clock start as the Knicks take on the Sixers down in Philadelphia. And let's finish things off today in the world of college basketball, staying in New York, but with the St. John's Red Storm, who on Tuesday took on the Seton Hall Pirates at Madison Square Garden, and St. John's still unranked right now, but moved to 14-5 on the year with a 65-60 victory, a comeback win over Seton Hall, and they come back in the second half down 15 points. Rick Pitino gets win number 899, and Dylan Mitchell as well as Dylan Darling deserve a lot of praise for St. John's win in this one. 17 points for Dylan Mitchell, had 11 rebounds, an assist, 2 steals, really involved, 7 of 14 from the field. But Dylan Darling, give him his props. He came in, played 26 minutes off the bench, where Ian Jackson only played 11 minutes, and Darling had a couple of huge plays down the stretch, including a monster steal against Bud Clark to give St. John's a little bit of cushion. In 26 minutes, he had 8 points, 3 of 4 shooting from the field, as well as 1 of 2 from beyond the arc. He had 3 rebounds, an assist, and 3 steals in the game. All 3 of those steals were huge in the second half for the Red Storm, and they get a huge conference win to take down Seton Hall at MSG. And St. John's really rolling right now. And after you saw them struggle in non-conference earlier in the season, they've had a turning point once Big East play has started. 7-1 in Big East play. The one loss coming to Providence in that stunner at Madison Square Garden a couple of weeks ago. But 14-5, 7-1 in Big East. They are rolling, and they are clearly now the number 2 team behind UConn in the Big East Conference, and it should be interesting in a couple weeks when they have to host UConn at Madison Square Garden. That game taking place on February 6th. But for right now, a huge win over Seton Hall, coming back from a trip from Philadelphia where they took down Villanova as well. So the top 2 teams behind UConn and St. John's in terms of the Big East Conference. Seton Hall as well as Villanova both go down to St. John's. And St. John's has looked really good recently, and they're looking to continue that tomorrow. They head out to Cincinnati to take on the Xavier Musketeers, and it's a battle of the Patinos as Rick Pitino looks for win number 900 of his college career. And you look at the opposite side, it is Richard Pitino, who takes over as the Xavier head coach at the start of this season and has the Musketeers at 11-8 overall and 3-5 in Big East Conference. I think when you look at it, St. John should handle this just like they have against every other team they've faced on the road in Big East play. Some tough wins that they've gotten on the road in Big East play this season, including on the road at Creighton, on the road at Villanova, as well as on the road at Georgetown, as well as on the road at Butler. So they've had 4 really good wins on the road in Big East play, and that's something that they're looking to bring into this game at Xavier. This game was supposed to be played at 2:30 in the afternoon, but now it is at 1:30 due to the inclement weather and snow in every area in terms of Big East play. So St. John's against Xavier, 1:30 tomorrow. Make sure you tune in as the Red Storm look to continue to roll. They are rolling right now, definitely, and look to make it a 6-game win streak as they continue on in Big East play. But that will do it for episode 137 of the MudWatch Sports Podcast. Please subscribe below. I've been Zach Mellum, and thanks for watching, and talk to you all on Tuesday.